A white gangster walks into Lenox Avenue in 1938 and calls Bumpy Johnson a word no man should say out loud. What happens next doesn't need a witness. It needs a legend. It's a Tuesday afternoon in August. Harlem is alive the way it always is, music bleeding out of doorways, dice games on the corner, women laughing on fire escapes, kids running between parked cars. Lenox Avenue doesn't sleep. It hums. And right in the middle of that hum, a white man steps out of a black Cadillac like he owns the block. His name is Eddie Malone. He's Italian, connected, works under Lucky Luciano's umbrella, handles collections in the Bronx, and thinks that gives him a pass anywhere in New York. He's wrong. Eddie walks into the Gold Room, a bar on Lenox that everyone knows belongs to Bumpy Johnson. Not on paper, but in every way that matters. The door swings open. Conversations don't stop right away, but they slow down. Eyes shift. Eddie's got two men with him, both white, both armed. They don't try to hide it. He walks straight to the bar, loud enough to be heard. Where's Bumpy? The bartender, a man named Solomon, doesn't blink. He wipes down a glass like Eddie didn't say a word. Eddie leans in. I asked you a question. Solomon nods toward the back corner. There, sitting alone at a round table, is Bumpy Johnson. No bodyguards hovering, no guns on the table, just a man in a tailored suit, a glass of bourbon, and a newspaper spread in front of him. He doesn't look up. Eddie crosses the room. His shoes click on the wood floor. The room doesn't go silent yet, but it's close. He stops at Bumpy's table. You Bumpy Johnson? Bumpy folds the newspaper, slowly. He sets it aside, picks up his glass, and takes a sip. Then he looks up. I am. Eddie smirks. Good, 'cause I got a message from some people you owe. Bumpy doesn't react. He just waits. Eddie leans forward, both hands on the table now. His voice drops, but not enough. Everyone in the room can still hear. You think you run Harlem, huh? You think just 'cause you got these? And then he says it. The word. The room doesn't just go quiet. It freezes. Someone drops a glass behind the bar. It shatters on the floor, but no one moves to clean it. Eddie's still smiling. He doesn't realize what he just did. Bumpy sets his glass down. He doesn't stand. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't even change his expression. He just looks at Eddie, long enough that Eddie's smile starts to fade. Then Bumpy speaks. You finished. Eddie blinks. What? I said. Are you finished? Bumpy's tone is calm, almost polite. Because if you are, we can talk. If you're not, you can leave. Eddie laughs, nervous now. He looks back at his guys, trying to find his confidence again. Are you threatening me? Bumpy shakes his head. No, I'm giving you a choice. Eddie stares at him. He doesn't know what to do with that. Bumpy stands, slowly. He buttons his jacket. He's taller than Eddie expected. Come with me, Bumpy says. We'll handle this like men. Eddie hesitates. His hand twitches near his coat where his gun is. Bumpy sees it. He doesn't react. You can bring that if it makes you feel safe, Bumpy says quietly, but you won't need it. Eddie looks around the room. Every eye is on him. He's boxed in and he knows it. He forces a grin. Yeah, sure, let's talk. Bumpy walks toward the back. Eddie follows. The door to the back room closes, and Lenox Avenue holds its breath. To understand what happened in that back room, you have to understand who Bumpy Johnson was in 1938. Not the legend, not the myth, the man. Bumpy didn't run Harlem like a warlord. He ran it like a mayor. He controlled the numbers racket, an illegal lottery that every working-class person in Harlem played. Nickels and dimes that added up to thousands every week. But Bumpy didn't just take. He gave back. When someone couldn't make rent, Bumpy made sure the landlord got paid. When a kid needed shoes for school, Bumpy handled it. When the police tried to shake down a shopkeeper, Bumpy made a call and it stopped. He didn't do it for gratitude. He did it because power without loyalty is just noise, and Harlem was loyal to Bumpy Johnson. By 1938, he'd been in the game for over a decade. He'd survived wars with Dutch Schultz. He'd navigated deals with the Italian mobs. He'd outlasted men who were louder, flashier, more violent. because Bumpy understood something most gangsters didn't. Fear is temporary. Respect lasts. He didn't carry a gun everywhere, didn't need 10 men around him, didn't shout or posture, or prove anything to anyone. When Bumpy walked into a room, people stood up, not because they were afraid, because they wanted to. He dressed sharp, spoke quietly, never waste words, and when he gave you his attention, you felt it, like standing in front of something bigger than yourself. That's who Eddie Malone insulted, not some street thug, not some hothead with a temper, a man who'd built an empire on discipline, strategy, and respect. Eddie thought his Italian connections made him untouchable. He thought wrong, because in 1938, the Italians didn't run Harlem. They worked with Harlem, and the man they worked with was Bumpy. Lucky Luciano knew it. Frank Costello knew it. Meyer Lansky knew it. Eddie Malone didn't. And now he was about to learn. In the back room of the Gold Room, there's a desk, 2 chairs, and a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. Bumpy sits. He gestures to the other chair. Eddie stays standing. His 2 men are outside. He's alone now, and he's starting to realize that might have been a mistake. Sit, Bumpy says. Eddie doesn't move. Bumpy doesn't repeat himself. He just waits. Finally, Eddie sits. He tries to look relaxed, but his knee bounces under the table. Bumpy leans back. Who sent you? Eddie clears his throat. That's between me and them. Bumpy nods. Fair enough. So let me ask you something else. He pauses. Do you know where you are? Eddie frowns. Yeah, Harlem. That's right, Bumpy says. And do you know who runs Harlem? Eddie opens his mouth. Close it. He's not stupid enough to say the wrong thing twice. Bumpy continues, his voice soft. You came into my place. You said something you shouldn't have said. In front of my people. Eddie shifts in his seat. Look, I didn't mean. Bumpy raises a hand. Eddie stops talking. I don't care what you meant, Bumpy says. I care what you did. Silence. Eddie's breathing gets heavier. He glances toward the door. Bumpy doesn't move. You're not leaving yet? Eddie swallows. So what now? You gonna kill me? Bumpy tilts his head like he's genuinely considering it. Then he shakes his head. No, he says. I'm not. Eddie exhales. But you're going to fix this, Bumpy adds. Eddie blinks. Fix what? Bumpy leans forward. You disrespected me. In public. That means everyone out there thinks they can do the same. You understand? Eddie nods quickly. Yeah, I get it. So here's what's going to happen, Bumpy says. You're going to walk back out there. You're going to apologize. And then you're going to leave Harlem. Tonight. And you're never coming back. Eddie stares at him. That's it? Bumpy's eyes don't change. That's it. Eddie almost laughs. Relief floods his face. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Bumpy stands. Good. Eddie stands too, eager now. He heads for the door. Eddie. He stops. Turns around. Bumpy's voice is quiet, almost gentle. If you ever say that word again, anywhere, to anyone, I'll hear about it. And next time, we won't talk. Eddie's face goes pale. He nods. Once. Then he leaves. Eddie Malone walks back into the main room of the Gold Room. Every head turns. The music from the jukebox is still playing, but no one's listening. The dice game in the corner has stopped mid-roll. The bartender, Solomon, stands frozen with a bottle in his hand. Everyone is waiting. Eddie's face is red. His jaw is tight. His 2 men step forward, but he waves them off. He clears his throat. The room doesn't help him. No one looks away. No one pretends they're not watching. He opens his mouth. Close it. Open it again. His voice cracks. He starts over. I apologize. It's quiet. Barely audible. Someone in the back mutters. Louder. Eddie's hands ball into fists. But he doesn't argue. He knows better now. I apologize, he says again, louder this time. I was out of line. No one responds. No one nods. No one accepts it. They just stare. Because an apology from a man like Eddie Malone doesn't mean anything. Not to them. But Bumpy Johnson made him say it. And that means everything. Eddie doesn't wait for forgiveness. He turns and walks toward the door, his men following close behind. The Cadillac is still parked outside. Eddie gets in without looking back. The engine starts. The car pulls away from the curb, and Lenox Avenue watches it go. Inside the gold room, Bumpy walks back to his table. He picks up his glass, take a sip, set it down. He doesn't say a word. Solomon breaks the silence first. He lets out a low whistle and goes back to wiping glasses. The dice game starts again. Conversations resume. The jukebox keeps playing, but something has shifted. Everyone in that room just witnessed power in its purest form. Not violence, not rage, not chaos. Control. Bumpy didn't raise his voice, didn't throw a punch, didn't pull a trigger. He didn't need to. He made Eddie Malone apologize in front of a room full of black men and women, made him bow his head, made him admit he was wrong. In 1938, in a country where men like Eddie thought they could say anything, do anything, go anywhere, Bumpy Johnson made him submit, and everyone saw it. A woman named Claudette sits at the bar. She's been coming to the gold room for years. She knows Bumpy, knows his reputation, but she's never seen anything like this. She leans toward Solomon. Did that really just happen? Solomon nods, a slight smile on his face. It did, just. Let him walk out. Solomon pours her another drink. Bumpy doesn't need to prove anything. That man came in here talking big, left talking small. That's the only proof Harlem needs. Claudette shakes her head, still processing. You thought there'd be blood. Solomon finishes for her. That's what Eddie thought, too. He slides the glass across the bar. That's why Bumpy's Bumpy. Solomon says, anybody can shoot a man. Take something else to break him without laying a hand on him. Claudette picks up her drink. Look over at Bumpy's table. He's reading his newspaper again. Like nothing happened. She smiles. Harlem's lucky to have him. Solomon nods. Yeah, we are. Later that night, word spreads. It moves through Harlem like wildfire. In barbershops, on street corners, in kitchens and living rooms. You hear what happened at the gold room. Eddie Malone came through talking reckless. Called Bumpy the word. Right to his face. What happened? Bumpy took him in the back. Made him apologize. Made him leave town. Just like that. Just like that. The story grows with every telling. Some say Eddie was crying. Some say Bumpy had a gun on the table the whole time. Some say Eddie's never coming back to New York. But the core of it stays the same. Eddie Malone disrespected Bumpy Johnson, and Bumpy handled it the way Bumpy always did, with calm, with control, with dominance that didn't need to shout. By the end of the week, even people who weren't there talked like they were. Because in Harlem, moments like this don't just belong to the people in the room. They belong to everyone. They become folklore. Proof. Evidence that power doesn't always come from a gun. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly who you are and making sure everyone else knows it too. Eddie Malone learned that lesson. Harlem already knew it. The truth about what happened in that back room didn't come out all at once. It came in pieces, whispers, fragments from people who heard it secondhand, third-hand, from someone who knew someone. But eventually, the story found its shape, and this is how it went. When Bumpy closed the door behind Eddie Malone, the first thing he did was nothing. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, calm. Eddie was still trying to figure out if he should be scared or relieved. He'd expected threats, maybe violence, maybe worse. But Bumpy wasn't giving him anything to react to, just silence. Eddie broke first. He always was going to. Look, Eddie said, I didn't come here to start trouble. I was just doing a job. Bumpy walked to the desk, sat down, gestured to the chair across from him. Eddie hesitated, then sat. Bumpy leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. Who's the job for? Eddie shifted. I told you. That's between me and... You came into my place, Bumpy interrupted, his voice still quiet. Used that word in front of my people. Now you're telling me you can't say who sent you. Eddie looked down. It's complicated. Bumpy nodded slowly. Let me make it simple then. He leaned forward. You got two choices, Eddie. You can tell me who sent you, and we figure this out like men, or you can walk out of here right now, and I make some calls. See how your bosses feel about you starting a war in Harlem over a collection job. Eddie's face went pale, because that was the thing about Bumpy Johnson. He wasn't just connected in Harlem. He had relationships, real ones, with Luciano, with Costello, with Meyer Lansky. If Bumpy made those calls, Eddie's bosses would hang him out to dry. Eddie swallowed hard. It was Sal Tornino. He said you owed from a card game last month, said to collect. And if you gave me trouble, to make it loud. Bumpy didn't react. He just absorbed the information. Sal Tornino, he repeated. He told you to use that word. Eddie shook his head quickly. No, that was me. You thought what? Bumpy's voice was still calm, but there was an edge now, razor thin. You thought it would make you look tough. Eddie didn't answer. Bumpy stood. I walked around the desk. Slowly. Eddie's hand twitched toward his coat again, where his gun was. Bumpy saw it. Go ahead, he said softly. Pull it out, if it makes you feel better. Eddie froze. Bumpy stopped right in front of him, close enough that Eddie had to look up. You know what the difference is between you and me, Eddie? Bumpy asked. Eddie didn't respond. You think a gun makes you dangerous, Bumpy said. I know it doesn't. He let that sit for a moment. Then he walked to the door. I opened it. Eddie blinked, confused. That's it. Bumpy turned back. No, you're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to walk back out there and apologize, loud enough for everyone to hear. Eddie's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Second, Bumpy continued, you're going to leave Harlem tonight. You're not coming back. Not for collections. Not for anything. Eddie nodded again, quicker this time. And third, Bumpy said, his voice dropping even lower, you're going to tell Sal Tornino that I don't owe him a damn thing. That card game was square, and if he's got a problem with it, he can call me himself. Eddie swallowed. He's not gonna like that. Bumpy smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then he shouldn't have sent you. There's a moment right there that people always ask about when they hear this story. Why didn't Bumpy just kill him? Eddie had disrespected him, publicly, used a word that carried centuries of hate behind it. In 1938, a man like Bumpy could have made Eddie disappear. No one would have asked questions. No one would have cared. But Bumpy didn't, because Bumpy Johnson understood something most men didn't. Killing Eddie would have been easy, satisfying, even. But it would have been temporary. Eddie's bosses would have sent someone else, then someone else. The cycle would have continued. But humiliating Eddie, making him apologize, sending him back to his bosses empty-handed and broken, that sent a message that would last. It told every white mobster, every out-of-town tough guy, every man who thought Harlem was soft, this is not a place you can walk into and talk reckless. This is not a place you disrespect, not without consequence. And the consequence wasn't always a bullet. Sometimes it was worse. Sometimes it was being made small in front of people who thought you were big. Eddie walked out of that back room a different man than the one who walked in. His shoulders were lower. His swagger was gone. He didn't look at anyone as he apologized, didn't try to save face. He just said the words and left. And Bumpy Johnson sat back down at his table, picked up his newspaper, and finished his drink. Like it was just another Tuesday. Eddie Malone's Cadillac disappears down Lenox Avenue, and the city swallows it whole. He doesn't stop for gas, doesn't stop for coffee, doesn't stop at all until he's across the bridge and back in the Bronx. When he walks into Sal Tornino's social club an hour later, his face is still pale. Sal's playing cards with 3 other men. He looks up, sees Eddie, and grins. You get my money? Eddie shakes his head. The grin fades. What do you mean? No. Eddie takes a breath. Bumpy says the game was square. Say if you have a problem with it, call him yourself. The room goes quiet. Sal stands slowly. He's a big man, thick neck, scarred knuckles, the kind of guy who's used to getting his way. He said that. Eddie nods. And what did you say? Sal asks. Eddie looks down. I said I'd deliver the message. Sal stares at him. Then he starts laughing. Not a happy laugh, a cold one. You went to Harlem to collect my money, and you came back with a message. Eddie doesn't respond. Sal takes a step closer. What happened, Eddie? He scares you. Eddie's jaw tightens. He didn't have to. Sal stops. That answer surprises. What's that mean? Eddie finally looks up. It means Bumpy Johnson's not someone you push. Not in Harlem. Not anywhere. Sal processes that. He's not stupid. He knows who Bumpy is, knows his reputation, but his pride won't let him back down completely. So what now? Sal asks. I just let it go. Eddie shrugs. That's on you. But if you send me back there, you're sending me alone. Sal doesn't like that, but he also doesn't argue, because deep down, he knows Eddie's right. Bumpy Johnson isn't worth a war. Not over a card game. Not over pride. Sal sits back down, picks up his cards. Get out of here, he mutters. Eddie leave. And that's the end of it. Back in Harlem, the story takes on a life of its own. By the next morning, everyone knows. The bootlegger on 125th Street, the seamstress on 7th Avenue, the preacher at Abyssinian Baptist, the numbers runners, the jazz musicians, the shopkeepers, they all hear the same thing. A white man came to Harlem and disrespected Bumpy Johnson. And Bumpy didn't kill him, didn't beat him, didn't even raise his voice. He just broke him. And that, to the people of Harlem, means more than any act of violence ever could, because violence is common. Violence is easy. Violence is what desperate men do when they've run out of options. But control is rare. Control is power. And Bumpy Johnson had it in abundance. A week later, a young man named Marcus sits on his stoop, listening to his uncle tell the story. Marcus is 17, smart, angry, the kind of anger that comes from watching the world treat people like him as less than human. He's heard stories about Bumpy before, knows he's someone important, but this one hits differently, so he just let him walk. Marcus asks. His uncle, a man named Raymond who works for Bumpy's numbers operation, nods. Why? Marcus presses. After what he said, Raymond leans back, lights a cigarette. Because Bumpy's not like other men. He don't react. He responds. Marcus frowns. What's the difference? Raymond blows out smoke. Reacting is what you do when you're scared, when you're trying to prove something. Responding is what you do when you already know who you are. Marcus thinks about that. Eddie Malone walked in there, thinking he could say whatever he wanted. Raymond continues, thinking of his skin, his connections, his gun, all that made him untouchable. And Bumpy showed him it didn't. Raymond taps ash off his cigarette. Didn't have to shoot him to do it either. Just had to make him feel what we feel every day. Marcus looks confused. What do you mean? Small, Raymond says simply. Powerless. Like the rules don't apply to you the way they apply to everyone else. Marcus goes quiet. Raymond stands, stretches. That's why people respect Bumpy. Not because he's the toughest. Not because he's the richest. Because he understands something most men don't. Raymond looks down at his nephew. That real power isn't taking. It's giving people a choice and making sure they choose right. He walks inside. Marcus stays on the stoop, thinking. In the weeks that follow, something shifts in Harlem. It's subtle, hard to put into words, but people walk a little taller, speak a little louder, look white cops in the eye a little longer, because they saw what happened when one of their own was disrespected. They saw Bumpy Johnson refuse to be small, and if Bumpy didn't have to shrink, maybe they didn't either. It's not a revolution. It's not a movement. It's just a feeling, a quiet, shared understanding that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you demand. And if you're smart, you demand it the way Bumpy did, with calm, with control, with the certainty that the world might not give it to you, but you're going to take it anyway. Eddie Malone never comes back to Harlem. Sal Tornino never makes that call. And Bumpy Johnson, he keeps doing what he always did, running his numbers, protecting his people, moving through the streets like a king who never needed a crown, because crowns are for men who need to be reminded their royalty. Bumpy Johnson didn't need reminding. Everyone already knew. 87 years later, the story is still told, not in history books, not in museums, in barbershops, on street corners, in living rooms where old men gather and young ones listen. The details change depending on who's telling it. Some say Eddie Malone was twice Bumpy's size. Some say there were 20 men in the gold room that day, all ready to back Bumpy up. Some say Eddie never made it out of Harlem alive. But the heart of the story stays the same. A white man disrespected Bumpy Johnson, and Bumpy handled it without losing his composure. his dignity, or his soul. That's the part that matters. That's the part that lasts. In 2025, a filmmaker named Jamal is doing research for a documentary on Harlem in the 1930s. He sits down with a woman named Miss Lorraine. She's 93 years old, sharp as a knife, and the granddaughter of Solomon, the bartender from the Gold Room. Jamal sets up his camera, adjusts the lighting, and starts with the standard question. When did your grandfather come to Harlem? What was it like back then? What did he do for work? Miss Lorraine answers politely, but Jamal can tell she's heard these questions 1,000 times. Then he asks about Bumpy Johnson. Her face changes. Her eyes light up. You want to know about Bumpy? She asks. Jamal nods. Miss Lorraine leans forward. Then let me tell you about the day my grandfather saw him break a man without touching him. She tells the story the way her grandfather told it to her, slowly, carefully, like she's handing Jamal something precious. When she finishes, Jamal sits back. That really happened? He asks. Miss Lorraine smiles. Baby, my grandfather didn't lie, and he didn't exaggerate. That's exactly how it went down. Jamal shakes his head, amazed. Why didn't Bumpy just kill him? I mean, in that era, with what Eddie said. Miss Lorraine cuts him off. Because Bumpy Johnson wasn't about revenge. He was about respect. She pauses, choosing her words. You kill a man, you prove you're dangerous. You humiliate a man, you prove you're powerful. There's a difference. Jamal writes that down. And the people of Harlem, Miss Lorraine continues, they needed to see that. They needed to see a black man stand up to a white man in 1938 and win, not with a gun, but with his mind, his presence, his refusal to be anything less than what he was. Her voice gets quieter. That story gave people hope, gave them pride, gave them proof that they didn't have to accept disrespect just because the world said they should. Jamal looks up from his notes. You think that's why people still talk about it? Miss Lorraine nods. I know that's why. The same year, a high school teacher named Mr. Collins is teaching a class on Harlem Renaissance history. One of his students, a kid named Dion, asks a question. Why do we always talk about writers and musicians? Dion asks. What about the people who actually ran things? Mr. Collins raises an eyebrow. Like who? Like Bumpy Johnson. The class goes quiet. Some students know the name. Some don't. Mr. Collins smiles. All right, tell me what you know about Bumpy Johnson. Dion sits up straighter. My grandpa told me a story about how Bumpy made a white gangster apologize in front of a whole room of people. Back in the 30s, another student, a girl named Keisha, jumps in. I heard that story too. My aunt told me. She said Bumpy didn't even have to fight him. Mr. Collins nods slowly. That story's been passed down for generations. You know why? The class waits. Because it's not just about Bumpy Johnson, Mr. Collins says. It's about what he represented. In a time when black people were told to stay quiet, stay small, stay in their place, Bumpy refused. And he didn't refuse with violence. He refused with dignity. He pauses. That's power. Real power. And that's why Harlem still talks about him. Dion nods, thinking. So it's not just about what he did. It's about how he did it. Exactly, Mr. Collins says. Decades earlier, in 1968, Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack. He's 62 years old. Thousands of people attend his funeral. The streets of Harlem overflow. People come from Brooklyn, the Bronx, New Jersey. Some who knew him. Some who only knew the stories. The preacher talks about Bumpy's contributions to the community, his generosity, his protection of the vulnerable. But after the service, outside the church, it's the stories people tell. An old man named Clarence, who used to run numbers for Bumpy, stands in a group of younger men. You heard the one about Eddie Malone? Clarence asks. Some of them have, some haven't. Clarence tells it anyway, because stories like that don't get old. When he finishes, one of the younger men shakes his head. They don't make them like Bumpy anymore. Clarence nods. No, they don't. Why not? Another asks. Clarence thinks about it. Because Bumpy understood something most people forget. Respect isn't about how loud you are. It's about how solid you are, how consistent, how many people can count on you to be exactly who you say you are. He lights a cigarette. Eddie Malone thought he could come into Harlem and talk any way he wanted, though his skin and his connections made him bulletproof. What happened to him? The younger man asks. Clarence smiles. Hey, learned that in Bumpy's world, there's things worse than bullets. Today, Lenox Avenue looks different than it did in 1938. The Gold Room is long gone, turned into a coffee shop, then a cell phone store, then something else. But if you talk to the right people, the old-timers who still sit on benches, the barbers who've been cutting hair for 40 years, the grandmothers who remember their grandmother's stories, they'll tell you about Bumpy, and eventually, they'll tell you about Eddie Malone, not because it was the most violent story, not because it was the most dramatic, but because it was the most bumpy, calm, controlled, definitive, a lesson delivered without cruelty, a boundary set without rage. A white man walked into Harlem thinking he could say anything. Bumpy Johnson taught him otherwise, and Harlem never forgot, because that's what legacy really is. Not monuments, not plaques, not museum exhibits. It's the stories people tell, the lessons they pass down, the moments that become mythology because they capture something true about the person at the center. Bumpy Johnson could have killed Eddie Malone that day, could have made an example out of him in the most brutal way possible, but he didn't, because Bumpy knew that violence fades, fear fades, but respect lasts forever. And on Lenox Avenue, in the barbershops and on the stoops, in the stories told by people who weren't even born yet, Bumpy Johnson's respect is still alive, still spoken, still passed down like a sacred truth, that you don't need to be the loudest to be heard. You don't need to be the most violent to be feared. You just need to know exactly who you are, and never let anyone make you forget it.